They say memory fades like old cloth left too long in the sun. But some things, some places, they hold on. They refuse to let go. This account, should anyone find it, is my attempt to hold on too. To remember what happened at the Garrison Estate, before the silence swallowed it whole. My name is Evelyn Parker. I am 24 years of age. I work in the sewing room of the Garrison Estate, a grand house 3 miles west of town, where I alter garments and repair linens for the household. The work is steady. The pay is fair enough for a woman of my station. I live in the boarding house on Mulberry Street with 11 other women, most of them laundresses and domestics. We share meals. We share laughter when we can. It is a simple life, but it is mine. The estate itself is beautiful in the way that old wealth is beautiful, cold, and perfect and untouchable. Mr. Cornelius Garrison owns it, though he is rarely seen. He travels often for business, they say. His son, Mr. Daniel Garrison, manages the household and the staff. He is 32, tall, clean-shaven, with pale eyes that seem to measure everything they fall upon. He dresses in dark suits that never wrinkle. He speaks softly, which somehow makes his words carry further. I first met him on my second day of employment. He entered the sewing room without knocking, a habit I would come to recognize, and stood watching me work for a full minute before he spoke. "You will keep the door open at all times," he said. "Closed doors breed idleness." "Yes, sir," I replied. "You will account for every spool of thread, every needle, every scrap of fabric. Waste is theft." "Yes, sir." He smiled then, thin and brief as a knife's edge. "We maintain order here, Evelyn. You'll find that liberating, in time." I did not understand what he meant. Not then. There were rules, of course. Every household has them. But the Garrison Estate had more than most. We were given a printed list on our first day, written in Mr. Daniel Garrison's meticulous hand. Staff will address the family only when spoken to. Staff will not linger in hallways or common spaces. Staff will not discuss household matters with one another. Staff will report any irregularities immediately to Mr. Daniel Garrison. The last rule troubled me, though I could not say why. What constituted an irregularity? Who decided? I met Thomas Brennan my third week there. He worked in the stables, caring for the horses and maintaining the carriage house. He was a kind man, soft-spoken, with hands scarred from years of labor. We would see each other at the end of the day sometimes, when I walked the path back toward town and he led the horses to the far pasture. We began to speak small things at first: the weather, the work, the way the light fell through the oak trees at dusk. He told me he had been at the estate for 2 years. He told me Mr. Daniel Garrison was exacting but fair, so long as you followed the rules exactly. "Exactly?" I asked. "To the letter," Thomas said. "He notices everything." I laughed, thinking he was exaggerating. Thomas did not laugh. It was in my 5th week that I first felt the wrongness beneath the surface. I had been mending a torn bedsheet in the sewing room when I heard footsteps in the hall. Slow, deliberate. They stopped outside my door, though the door was open, as required. I looked up. No one was there. But I could feel eyes on me, heavy as hands. The air in the room grew thick, and for a moment I could not draw breath. Then the footsteps resumed, moving away down the corridor, fading into silence. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses settle, floorboards creak. But that night, lying in my narrow bed at the boarding house, I could not shake the feeling that something in that house was watching, waiting. And I could not shake the memory of Mr. Daniel Garrison's smile, thin and brief as a knife's edge, and the way he had said, "You'll find that liberating, in time." Archivist note: the following pages are partially illegible due to water damage. Continuation located in secondary file. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing and becoming part of our community. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We love hearing from our amazing viewers all around the world. Before we begin the next part, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're listening from and the exact time right now. We're deeply interested in knowing how far and at what times of day or night these documented stories that time tried to erase reach. The incident with the thread occurred 6 weeks into my employment. I had been working on a set of curtains for the East Parlor when Mr. Daniel Garrison entered the sewing room. He did not greet me. He walked directly to my supply cabinet and began counting the spools of thread, running his finger along each one, his lips moving silently. When he finished, he turned to me. "You are short 1 spool of black thread," he said. I looked up from my work, startled. "Sir, I accounted for everything this morning. The ledger is incorrect." His voice remained soft, almost gentle. "Or you are careless. Which is it, Evelyn?" My throat tightened. "I don't believe I am careless, sir. Perhaps there was an error in the original inventory." "There are no errors in my inventory." He stepped closer, and I smelled camphor and something else, something bitter. "When you make a mistake, Evelyn, the proper response is to acknowledge it, to accept correction. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Then acknowledge your mistake." I wanted to protest. I had been meticulous with the thread, counting each spool twice, but the look in his pale eyes stopped me. There was something hungry in them, something waiting. "I made a mistake, sir," I said quietly. He smiled. "Good. The cost of the thread will be deducted from your wages, and you will recount the entire inventory tonight before you leave. Every item. I will review your ledger in the morning." It took me 3 hours to recount everything. When I finally left the estate, the sun had long since set. The path back to town was dark, and I walked quickly, my breath forming clouds in the cold October air. Thomas was waiting by the gate. "You're late," he said, concern creasing his brow. I told him what had happened. As I spoke, his expression grew troubled. "How many spools did you count?" he asked. "The same as this morning. Every single one accounted for." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, 3 months ago, he accused me of leaving a stall door unlatched. I knew I had latched it. I check every door twice, but he stood there and told me I was careless. And I said I was sorry. I said I made a mistake." "Had you?" "No." Thomas looked toward the estate, its windows glowing like yellow eyes in the darkness. "But it was easier to agree. It's always easier to agree." We walked together for a while in silence. Then Thomas said, "There was a girl before you, Rebecca. She worked in the kitchen. She lasted 4 months." "What happened to her?" "She left. Suddenly. One day she was there. The next she was gone. No notice. No goodbye." He paused. "Mr. Garrison said she had stolen silver. She denied it, but he found it in her room at the boarding house, hidden in her mattress." Something cold settled in my stomach. "Do you believe she stole it?" Thomas did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I believe it was found in her room." That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the missing spool of thread that was not missing, about Rebecca and the silver hidden in her mattress, about the rules and the ledger and Mr. Daniel Garrison's pale, measuring eyes. The next morning, when I arrived at the estate, there was a photograph on my work table. It was old, the edges yellowed and curling. The image showed a family standing in front of a house, not the Garrison Estate, but something smaller, humbler. A man and a woman and 3 children, all dressed in their Sunday best. The woman was colored, like me. She stood with her hand on the shoulder of the smallest child, and though the photograph was faded, I could see the pride in her posture. I picked it up, confused. It was not mine. I had never seen it before. Mr. Daniel Garrison's voice came from the doorway. "I found that in your room." I spun around. "My room? Sir, I don't understand." "In your room at the boarding house. Mrs. Fletcher was kind enough to allow me to inspect it this morning, after yesterday's incident with the thread. I felt it prudent to ensure there were no other irregularities." My hands began to tremble. "Sir, I have never seen this photograph. It is not mine. It was in your dresser drawer, beneath your undergarments." He stepped into the room. "This photograph belongs to the estate. It was taken from the library collection. Theft, Evelyn." That is what this is." I did not take it. My voice cracked. "I swear to you, I have never seen it before this moment." He studied me with those pale eyes, and I saw something flicker there, not anger, but satisfaction. A cat watching a mouse realize the trap has closed. "Then how did it come to be in your possession?" I could not answer. There was no answer that would satisfy him. "You will work through Sunday to make up for this transgression," he said, "without additional pay, and I will be watching you more closely from now on. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." He took the photograph from my shaking hands and left. I stood alone in the sewing room, staring at the empty doorway. And then I noticed something I had not seen before: scratches on the inside of the doorframe. Faint and old. They looked deliberate, intentional. I stepped closer and saw that they formed letters, carved carefully into the wood. "He watches, always. Trust no room. R. M. Rebecca." Rebecca had left a warning, and I understood finally what Thomas had meant when he said it was easier to agree, because Mr. Daniel Garrison did not simply want obedience. He wanted submission, confession, the breaking of spirit disguised as the keeping of order. And the photograph that family standing proud in front of their humble home had been placed in my room the same way the silver had been placed in Rebecca's. We were not careless. We were being collected. November arrived with frost on the windows and new rules posted in the servants' hall. Staff will no longer take meals together. Meals will be taken in individual work areas. Staff will not congregate at the gate or on the grounds after working hours. All personal correspondence must be reviewed by Mr. Daniel Garrison before posting. I read them with a sinking heart. The third rule especially, it meant every letter I wrote to my sister in Virginia would pass through his hands first. Every word weighed and measured. Thomas and I had taken to meeting farther from the estate, down by the old stone bridge where the road forked toward town. We spoke quickly now, always watching the path behind us. "He's separating us," Thomas said, "making sure we can't talk to each other." "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because together, we might realize we're not the ones making mistakes." The work grew stranger. Mr. Garrison began requesting impossible tasks. He would ask me to repair a garment by noon, then change the specifications at 11. He would request fabrics we did not have in inventory, then express disappointment when I could not produce them. Each failure, each impossibility was recorded in a leather-bound book he carried with him. "3 infractions this week, Evelyn," he would say, tapping the page with his pen. "We must do better." I stopped protesting, stopped defending myself. Like Thomas said, it was easier to agree. But I began to notice other things. The west wing of the estate was kept locked. None of the staff were permitted there, not even for cleaning. When I asked Mrs. Fletcher, the head of household, about it, she pressed her lips into a thin line and said, "That's family business. We don't ask about family business." At night, I sometimes heard sounds from that direction. Footsteps above the ceiling of my workroom. A rhythmic tapping, like someone knocking on wood, over and over. Once, I heard what sounded like crying high and thin, like a child. But when I mentioned it to Martha, one of the laundresses, she went pale. "Don't talk about the sounds," she whispered. "Don't ever talk about the sounds." "Why not?" "Because the last person who did was dismissed the next day. Mr. Garrison said she was spreading rumors, creating disruption." Martha gripped my arm. "The sounds are not your concern. Nothing in this house is your concern except your work. Do you understand?" I understood. But understanding did not stop the sounds. It did not stop the feeling of being watched. And it did not explain why, when I walked past certain rooms, I felt a cold that had nothing to do with November. It was Thomas who first noticed the pattern. We were sitting by the bridge, our breath forming clouds in the early evening air, when he said, "Have you noticed how many people have left?" "Left? In the 2 years I've been here, 7 people have been dismissed or resigned. All of them colored, All of them after Mr. Garrison found something in their possession or accused them of breaking a rule. He looked at me, his eyes dark with worry. And each time, right before they left, new rules would appear, rules that made it harder for the rest of us to communicate. What are you saying? I'm saying this has happened before, many times, and I'm saying that you need to be very, very careful. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my narrow bed at the boarding house and thought about Rebecca's message carved into the door frame. He watches always. Trust no room. The next morning, I found a letter on my work table. It was addressed to my sister, but it had been opened. My own words stared back at me, but they had been marked through with red ink. In the margin, Mr. Garrison had written, "Inappropriate content. Suggests dissatisfaction with employment. Rewrite and resubmit for approval." All I had written was that I missed her, that the work was difficult but I was managing, that I hoped to visit at Christmas. He had found even that unacceptable. I was rewriting the letter, carefully avoiding anything that might be construed as complaint, when I heard the tapping again. It was louder this time, more insistent, coming from directly above my head. Tap, tap, tap. Then a pause. Tap, 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 tap. A pattern. Deliberate. I looked up at the ceiling, my heart racing, and then I realized it was not random. Someone was trying to communicate. 3 taps. A pause. 5 taps. 3, 5. I counted the alphabet in my head. C, E. The tapping continued, and I grabbed a scrap of paper, writing down the numbers as they came. CELAR. Cellar. The tapping stopped as suddenly as it had begun. I sat frozen, the paper trembling in my hand. Someone was in the West Wing. Someone was trapped there, and they were trying to tell me where. That evening, Thomas met me by the bridge as usual. I showed him the paper. His face went gray. "Evelyn, no. Whatever you're thinking, no. Someone is in that house. Someone who needs help." "You don't know that. It could be pipes. It could be—" "It's spelled cellar, Thomas. That's not pipes." He stood, pacing, his hands clenched. "If you're caught in the West Wing, he'll dismiss you. Or worse. You saw what he did with the photograph. He plants evidence. He'll say you were stealing, breaking in, anything to justify." "Justify what?" Thomas stopped pacing. When he looked at me, there was something broken in his eyes. "I think people have disappeared from this house. Not just been dismissed, disappeared. And I think Mr. Garrison knows why." The wind moved through the bare trees, and somewhere in the distance, a crow called out harsh and lonely. "Then I have to know," I said. "I have to see." "If you go into that cellar," Thomas whispered, "promise me one thing." "What?" "Promise me you'll leave something behind, some record, so if you disappear too, someone will know, someone will remember." I thought of Rebecca's warning carved into the doorframe, of the photograph planted in my room, of all the others who had come before me silent and erased. "I promise," I said. And that night, I began to plan. It happened on a Tuesday. I was mending a waistcoat in the sewing room when Mr. Daniel Garrison entered with a man I had never seen before. The stranger was elderly, well-dressed, with a silver watch chain across his vest. He looked at me with the detached curiosity one might show a horse at auction. "This is the one?" the stranger asked. "Yes," Mr. Garrison replied. "Evelyn Parker, competent seamstress, obedient, properly trained." The stranger walked closer, studying my face, my hands, the work in my lap. I kept my eyes down, my heart hammering against my ribs. "She's comely enough," the stranger said. "Good teeth?" My blood went cold. "Show him," Mr. Garrison said softly. I looked up, confused. "Sir." "Your teeth, Evelyn. Mr. Whitmore is considering hiring you for his household in Charleston. He'd like to ensure you're in good health." Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to stand and walk out, but I thought of Rebecca and the silver hidden in her mattress, of the photograph placed in my drawer, of the leather-bound book where Mr. Garrison recorded every infraction. I opened my mouth. Mr. Whitmore stepped closer, tilting my head back with his fingers beneath my chin. He examined my teeth like I was livestock. Acceptable. No obvious decay. Good bone structure. He released me and turned to Mr. Garrison. What are her debts? Debts? I whispered. Mr. Garrison smiled that thin smile. The thread you lost, the photograph, the numerous infractions of household rules, the cost of your training and lodging. It amounts to approximately $140. $140, nearly a year's wages. I haven't been charged for lodging, I said, my voice shaking. I pay for my own room at the boarding house. The estate provides your meals, does it not? Your training? The tools of your trade? He opened the leather-bound book and showed me a page covered in neat figures. I keep meticulous records, Evelyn. You've been accruing debt since the day you arrived. Mr. Whitmore is willing to purchase your contract and take responsibility for that debt. You would work for him until it's repaid. Purchase. Contract. The words made my stomach turn. I never agreed to any contract, I said. You agreed to the terms of employment when you accepted this position. All staff agree to be held responsible for any losses or damages incurred during their service. He turned the book toward me, and there, on the first page, was my signature. Below it, in small print, I had never noticed, were the terms he described. I had signed it on my first day. I had been so grateful for the work, so eager to prove myself, that I had signed without reading carefully. This isn't legal, I whispered. It's perfectly legal, mister. Whitmore said, sounding bored. Debt servitude is a recognized practice. You owe money. I'm willing to pay it. In exchange, you work off the debt. Simple as that. No. The word came out stronger than I expected. No, I won't go. I'll repay the debt myself. Mr. Garrison's hand came down on my shoulder, gentle as a serpent's coil. Evelyn, don't make this difficult. Mr. Whitmore is offering you an opportunity. A fresh start. You should be grateful. I won't go, I repeated. The stranger's expression hardened. Garrison, I don't have time for this. Either she agrees, or I'll find someone more compliant. Give me a moment with her, Mr. Garrison said. Mr. Whitmore nodded and left the room. As soon as the door closed, Mr. Garrison's grip on my shoulder tightened. Not enough to bruise, but enough to make me acutely aware of his strength. Listen to me carefully, he said, his voice still soft, still controlled. You will accept Mr. Whitmore's offer. You will thank him for his generosity, and you will leave quietly. Why are you doing this? Because order must be maintained. Because people like you need to understand their place. Because I decide what happens in this house, and I have decided that you are no longer needed here. He leaned closer, and I smelled that bitter scent again, sharper now. If you refuse, I will report to the sheriff that you have stolen from this estate. I have evidence, a silver candlestick hidden in your room. I placed it there this morning. My breath stopped. I will testify against you, he continued. Mrs. Fletcher will testify that she saw you near the library where the candlestick belongs. You will be arrested. You will be tried. And you will be convicted. Do you understand? Tears burned my eyes, but I would not let them fall. You're a monster. I'm a man of order. He released my shoulder and stepped back. Now, Mr. Whitmore is waiting. What will you tell him? I thought of Charleston, of being sent away where no one knew my name, where I would work off an impossible debt with no end in sight. I thought of Thomas by the bridge, waiting for me. Of my sister in Virginia who would never know what happened to me. And I thought of the tapping from the West Wing. CELAR. Someone was trapped in this house. Someone Mr. Garrison wanted silenced. And if I left, if I disappeared like Rebecca and all the others, that person would remain trapped. That voice would remain unheard. Someone was trapped. Someone was trapped in this house. I need time to collect my things, I said carefully. Mr. Garrison studied me, suspicion flickering in his pale eyes. You'll leave tonight. Mr. Whitmore departs at dawn. Then I need to go to the boarding house, to pack. Thomas can bring your belongings to you. I have personal items, private items. I won't have Thomas handling them. A long silence. Then, you have 1 hour. Mrs. Fletcher will escort you to the boarding house and back. If you attempt to run, the sheriff will be notified immediately. I understand. He smiled, satisfied. Good. I'm glad we could reach an understanding. But as he turned to leave, I saw something else in that smile. Something eager. He was not simply maintaining order. He was enjoying this. The control. The breaking. The moment when defiance finally crumbled into submission. He wanted to watch me break. And I realized, with a clarity that cut like glass, that this was not about debts or rules or maintaining household order. This was about power. About collecting people like the photograph he had placed in my room, capturing them, framing them, putting them exactly where he wanted them. Mrs. Fletcher appeared in the doorway, her face carefully blank. Come along, Evelyn. Quickly now. I followed her out of the estate, down the path toward town, my mind racing. 1 hour. I had 1 hour to decide to submit, to run, or to do something else entirely. As we walked, I glanced back at the house. In a third-floor window of the west wing, I saw a face, just for a moment, pale and thin, pressed against the glass. Then it was gone. But I had seen it, and I knew. Someone was in that house. Someone was waiting. And Mr. Daniel Garrison had just made his first mistake. He had given me 1 hour. I did not go to the boarding house. Mrs. Fletcher walked me to the front gate, then hesitated. I have to see the postmaster about tomorrow's deliveries, she said, not meeting my eyes. You have 30 minutes. Don't make me regret this. She turned and walked toward the post office, her shoulders tight with some burden I could not name. A kindness, perhaps, or guilt. I ran. Not toward the boarding house, but toward the colored section of town, where Thomas's sister Rachel kept a small shop selling thread and notions. I burst through the door, breathless. Evelyn? Rachel looked up from her counter, startled. What's happened? I need you to get a message to Thomas. Tell him to meet me at the bridge in 20 minutes. Tell him to bring a lantern and a pry bar from the stable. Can you do that? What's going on? Please, Rachel. There isn't time. She saw something in my face that made her nod. I'll send my boy right now. And I need one more thing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the piece of paper with the tapped message. If I don't come back tonight, if anything happens to me, I need you to take this to the sheriff. Tell him to search the cellar of the Garrison Estate. Tell him there's someone trapped there. Rachel took the paper with trembling hands. Evelyn, you're scaring me. I'm scared too, I admitted. But someone needs help, and I'm the only one who knows. I left before she could argue and ran through the back alleys toward the estate. The sun was setting, painting the sky the color of old blood. I had perhaps 20 minutes before Mrs. Fletcher would return to the boarding house and discover I was not there. Thomas was already at the bridge when I arrived, lantern in one hand, pry bar in the other. His face was tight with worry. Tell me, he said. I told him everything about Mr. Whitmore, about the debt, about the silver candlestick planted in my room, about the face I had seen in the window. He's forcing you to leave so you can't investigate, Thomas said, so you can't find whoever's in there. Then we find them now, tonight, before he can stop us. Evelyn, if we're caught. We're already caught, Thomas. Don't you see? He'll never let us go. Not really. There will always be another debt, another infraction, another reason to control us. The only way out is through. Thomas looked at the estate in the distance, its windows beginning to glow with lamplight. Then he looked at me, and something resolved in his expression. Then we go together. We approached from the back of the property, staying low, moving through the overgrown garden. The servants would be preparing dinner now, distracted. Mr. Garrison would be in his study, reviewing his ledgers. We had perhaps 30 minutes before anyone noticed our absence. The cellar entrance was on the north side of the house, hidden behind a tangle of dead rose bushes. The door was locked, but Thomas made quick work of it with the pry bar. The old wood splintered, and the door swung open, revealing a set of stone steps descending into darkness. The smell hit us first damp earth and something else, something worse. Decay, illness. Thomas raised the lantern, and we descended. The cellar was larger than I expected, stretching beneath the entire west wing. The walls were stone, slick with moisture. Our footsteps echoed. In the far corner, I saw another door, newer than the others, with a heavy bolt drawn across it. "There," I whispered. We crossed the cellar, and Thomas slid the bolt back. The door opened. The room beyond was small, perhaps 10 feet square. There was a cot, a bucket, a small table, and on the cot, wrapped in a thin blanket, was a woman. She was colored, perhaps 40 years old, terribly thin. Her eyes were enormous in her gaunt face, and when she saw us, she made a sound not quite a word, more like a sob of relief. "Please," she whispered. "Please, I've been here so long." I knelt beside her. "What's your name?" "Anna Lewis." Her voice was raspy, unused. "He brought me here 8 months ago, said I owed him money, said I had to work it off, but instead he locked me down here. He brings food sometimes, not always. He says I have to confess. I have to admit what I stole, but I didn't steal anything. I didn't." "We're going to get you out," Thomas said firmly. "Can you walk?" I think so, but when she tried to stand, her legs buckled. Thomas caught her. "I'll carry you. Evelyn, take the lantern." We moved as quickly as we could, but Anna was weak, and the stairs were steep. By the time we reached the top, I could hear voices from the house raised, urgent. "They've noticed," Thomas said. "We have to go. Now." We stumbled through the garden, Thomas carrying Anna, me lighting the way. Behind us, I heard Mr. Garrison's voice, sharp with fury. "Find them! Search the grounds!" We reached the path and ran. Rachel was waiting at the bridge with her wagon, just as I had hoped. She gasped when she saw Anna. "Get her in," I said. "Take her to Dr. Morrison. Tell him everything." "What about you?" Rachel asked. "We have to go back. We have to make sure there's evidence, that there's a record of what he's done." I looked at Thomas. "You should go with them." "No," Thomas said simply. "I told you, we go together." Rachel drove away with Anna, and Thomas and I stood on the bridge, breathing hard. In the distance, we could see lanterns moving through the estate grounds. They were searching for us. "The study," I said. "The leather-bound book. That's where he keeps his records. If we can get that, they'll see us. Then we'll have to be quick." We ran back toward the estate, this time approaching from the front. Bold, visible, because now we had nothing to lose. The front door was unlocked. We slipped inside, moving through the shadows. The study was on the first floor, door slightly ajar. I could hear voices upstairs, Mr. Garrison directing the search. We entered the study. The leather-bound book was on his desk, closed. I grabbed it, tucking it under my arm. Thomas was already at the filing cabinet, pulling open drawers. "Evelyn," he breathed, "look at this." There were files, dozens of them, each one labeled with a name and a date. I opened one at random. Sarah Mills, 1894. Inside were detailed records, debts, infractions, purchases. At the bottom, in Mr. Garrison's precise hand, transferred to Whitmore, payment received. Another file, James Cooper, 1893, transferred to Caldwell Mill, payment received. They were contracts, bills of sale. He had been selling people colored servants, each one trapped by manufactured debts, each one sold to work off impossible sums. "He's been doing this for years," Thomas whispered. Footsteps in the hall, heavy, approaching. We looked at each other. There was no time to run, no time to hide. The door opened. Mr. Daniel Garrison stood there, 2 men behind him. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "Well," he said softly, "here you are." I held the leather book against my chest. "It's over. We found Anna. We have your records. The sheriff will know everything." "The sheriff is a friend of mine," Mr. Garrison said, stepping into the room. "As is the judge, as is Mr. Whitmore and every other man of standing in this county. Do you really think they'll believe two colored servants over me, over us? Dr. Morrison will examine Anna. He'll see what you've done to her. He'll see a woman suffering from mental hysteria, delusions. It's very sad, really. So sad that I tried to help her by giving her work, and this is how she repays me. With wild accusations." He held out his hand. "Give me the book, Evelyn." "No." His expression hardened. "Then we'll take it." The two men moved toward us. Thomas raised the pry bar, placing himself between them and me. "Don't," Thomas said quietly. "Don't come closer." But they did. What happened next was fast and brutal. Thomas swung the pry bar. It connected with one man's shoulder, and he went down with a cry. The second man grabbed Thomas, and they struggled. I ran for the door, still clutching the book, but Mr. Garrison caught my arm. "Let go," I screamed. "You foolish girl," he hissed. "You had a chance to leave quietly. Now you've made this so much worse for yourself." I bit his hand. He released me with a shout of pain, and I ran out of the study, down the hall, toward the front door. Behind me, I heard shouting, footsteps, chaos. I burst out onto the front lawn just as a wagon pulled up. Dr. Morrison stepped down, followed by Rachel and Sheriff Porter. "Sheriff!" I cried. "In the house, Mr. Garrison. He's been holding people prisoner. He's been selling them." The sheriff looked at me, then at the book in my hands. "Is that so?" Mr. Garrison emerged from the house, his hand wrapped in a handkerchief, his composure returning. "Sheriff, thank God you're here. These two have broken into my home. They've assaulted my staff, and now they're making wild accusations." "This book," I said, holding it up. "It has everything. Names, dates, payments. He's been selling people into servitude for years." The sheriff took the book from my hands. He opened it. His expression did not change. And my heart sank, because I saw it in his eyes he already knew. "Now, Evelyn," Sheriff Porter said carefully, "let's all calm down and discuss this reasonably." The way he said my name familiar, patronizing, told me everything I needed to know. He had been in that study before. He had seen those files. Mr. Garrison smiled. "Thank you, Sheriff. As I was saying, these two have clearly suffered some kind of breakdown, the stress of their duties, perhaps. I've been very concerned about their behavior lately. Anna Lewis," I said loudly. "She's in Dr. Morrison's wagon right now. She'll tell you what happened. She'll tell you how Mr. Garrison locked her in the cellar for 8 months. Dr. Morrison stepped forward. He was an older man, white-haired, with a reputation for fairness. "I've examined the woman. She's severely malnourished and dehydrated. She shows signs of prolonged confinement." He looked at the sheriff. "William, whatever's going on here, that woman needs medical attention, and she needs to give her testimony." The sheriff's jaw tightened. He looked at Mr. Garrison, who had gone very still. "I'd like to hear what she has to say," Dr. Morrison continued, "and I'd like to examine this book, if you don't mind, Daniel." It was the Daniel that did it, the familiarity that nevertheless contained a warning. Dr. Morrison was a respected man, a white man, and he was asking questions. Mr. Garrison's mask slipped, just for a moment. "Of course, though I'm certain this is all a misunderstanding." "Then let's clear it up," Dr. Morrison said firmly. Thomas emerged from the house, supported by one of the sheriff's deputies. His face was bruised, but he was walking. He stood beside me, and I took his hand. They brought Anna out. She was wrapped in blankets, trembling, but when she saw Mr. Garrison, something fierce kindled in her eyes. "Tell them," I said softly. "Tell them what he did." And she did. Her voice was weak at first, but it grew stronger as she spoke. She told them how she had worked as a cook at the estate, how Mr. Garrison had accused her of theft a silver spoon that later appeared in her bag, how he had said she owed him money, how he had locked her in the cellar and told her she would stay there until she confessed. "I confessed," she said, her voice breaking. After 3 months, I confessed to anything he wanted. I signed papers. I begged him to let me go. But he said the confession wasn't sincere enough. He said I had to mean it. He kept me there. She could not continue. Dr. Morrison's face had gone white with fury. "Sheriff, I want that cellar searched. Now." "Now just wait a minute," Mr. Garrison began. "No," Dr. Morrison said sharply. "No more waiting. No more excuses. If what this woman says is true, this is a serious crime." The sheriff looked between Dr. Morrison and Mr. Garrison. The calculation was visible on his face. Which man's influence mattered more? Which side would protect him? "I'll need to see the cellar," he said finally. We returned to the house, all of us, a strange procession, down the steps, through the cellar, to that locked room. The sheriff examined everything: the cot, the bucket, the heavy bolt on the door. When he returned, his face was grim. "Daniel, I need you to come to my office. We need to discuss this." "Discuss?" Thomas's voice was incredulous. "He imprisoned a woman for 8 months. He has files on dozens of others. This isn't a discussion, it's a crime." "Now, son, you need to watch your tone." "He's right, Doctor," Morrison said. "William, this goes beyond a simple dispute. This is false imprisonment, fraud, possibly worse." He held up the leather book. "I've been reading this while we waited. There are names here, people I know, people who disappeared from town and were said to have moved away or gotten work elsewhere." The sheriff's expression darkened. "You're accusing Daniel Garrison of—" "I'm not accusing anyone yet. I'm saying these are serious allegations that require serious investigation, and they require witnesses." He looked at Anna, at Thomas, at me. "These 3 need protection. If something happens to them before this is resolved—" "Nothing will happen to them," Mr. Garrison said, his voice tight. "They're making false accusations based on misunderstandings and their own criminal behavior. They broke into my home. They stole my property. They assaulted my staff. I'm the victim here." "Then you won't mind if they stay in protective custody while we sort this out," Dr. Morrison said. It was not a question. The sheriff looked like he wanted to refuse. But Dr. Morrison's gaze was steady, and behind him, Rachel and several other townspeople had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Word was spreading. "Fine," the sheriff said. "They'll stay at the jailhouse tonight, for their own safety. We'll continue this in the morning." "The morning?" I asked. "What about the files? What about Anna's testimony?" "These things take time, girl," the sheriff said shortly. "We have to follow proper procedure." Proper procedure, which meant time for Mr. Garrison to call in favors, to make arrangements, to ensure that his version of events became the official one. But as they led us away, Thomas and Anna and me, Dr. Morrison, caught my eye. He gave the smallest nod. He would keep the book. He would read it thoroughly, and he would not let this be buried. It was a small hope, but it was hope. The jailhouse was cold. They put Anna in a separate cell, and Thomas and I in another. We sat on the hard bench, exhausted, watching the oil lamp flicker. "Do you think they'll actually investigate?" Thomas asked quietly. "I don't know, but we did what we could. We got Anna out. We got the evidence. Whatever happens now, at least it's not a secret anymore." "Evelyn?" "Yes?" "When I saw you in that study, holding that book, refusing to back down," he smiled, tired but genuine, "you were magnificent." I leaned against his shoulder. We were magnificent. Through the small window, I could see the Garrison Estate in the distance, its windows dark now, except for one, the study, where Mr. Garrison was likely burning files, destroying evidence, preparing his defense. But he couldn't destroy everything. He couldn't destroy Anna's testimony. He couldn't destroy the cellar. He couldn't destroy the truth. And most importantly, he couldn't destroy the fact that people knew now. Dr. Morrison knew. Rachel knew. The townspeople who had gathered knew. The secret was broken. Whatever happened next, that could not be undone. In the morning, I thought, we would face whatever came, but tonight, we had survived. And survival, I was learning, was sometimes its own form of victory. The hearing was held in the town hall on Thursday morning. They had kept us in the jailhouse for 3 days. 3 days in which, Dr. Morrison later told us, he had been very busy. He had brought in a lawyer from the city, a Mr. James Whitfield, a colored man with a reputation for taking difficult cases. He had examined Anna thoroughly and documented her condition. He had read every page of the leather book, and he had gone through the county records, cross-referencing names. What he found was damning. The town hall was packed. I had never seen so many people gathered in one place, colored folks from our section of town, white farmers, shopkeepers, even several members of the town council. Word had spread fast, and everyone wanted to witness what would happen. Mr. Daniel Garrison sat at the front table with his lawyer, a thin man named Reeves who kept shuffling papers nervously. Garrison himself looked calm, composed, dressed in an immaculate black suit. But I saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Judge Hamilton presided, an elderly man I had seen at the courthouse before, known for being fair but old-fashioned in his views. He gavelled the room to silence. We're here to examine the allegations made against Mr. Daniel Garrison by Miss Evelyn Parker, Mr. Thomas Brennan, and Miss Anna Lewis. Mr. Whitfield, you may present your case. James Whitfield stood. He was tall, gray-haired, with a voice that carried authority. Your Honor, what we're dealing with here is not a simple dispute between employer and employees. What we're dealing with is a systematic scheme to enslave free citizens through fraud and false imprisonment. A murmur went through the crowd. Judge Hamilton raised his hand for silence. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Whitfield. And I have serious evidence, Your Honor. He held up the leather book. This ledger, kept by Mr. Garrison himself, documents a pattern stretching back at least 7 years. Colored workers are hired at the Garrison Estate under normal terms. Then, they are accused of various infractions: theft, carelessness, breach of contract. Debts are assigned to these infractions, often inflated or entirely fabricated. The workers are told they must pay off these debts through continued service. And when they cannot pay, or when they become troublesome, they are sold. Sold? Judge Hamilton leaned forward. Transferred, in Mr. Garrison's language. But the ledger shows payments received from various parties: Mr. Whitmore in Charleston, the Caldwell Mill, the Patterson Farm. These are purchases. Human beings sold to work off debts they never legitimately incurred. This, Your Honor, is debt peonage, and it is illegal under both state and federal law. Mr. Reeves shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is speculation based on a misreading of standard employment records. Mr. Garrison simply kept detailed accounts of legitimate business transactions. Then let's examine those transactions, Whitfield said smoothly. He opened the book to a marked page. Sarah Mills, 1894. According to this record, she was accused of stealing a silver candlestick valued at $12. She was assessed a debt of $100, including the cost of the candlestick, her training, room and board, and various administrative fees. When she could not pay, she was transferred to Mr. Whitmore for a payment of $80. He looked up at Judge Hamilton. For a $12 candlestick, this woman was effectively sold for $80. The profit to Mr. Garrison was $68. And Sarah Mills? No one has seen her since. She went to work in Charleston, Mr. Garrison said, his voice calm. Many of my former employees have found better opportunities elsewhere. Then let's bring them back. Whitfield said, let's bring Sarah Mills and James Cooper and Rebecca Mason and all the others listed in this book. Let's ask them about their experiences. That would take months. Then we'll start with the one we have. Whitfield gestured toward Anna. Miss Lewis, would you please stand? Anna stood slowly. She was wearing a clean dress now, provided by Rachel, and Dr. Morrison had been feeding her regularly for 3 days. But she was still painfully thin, and when she spoke, her voice trembled. Tell the judge what happened to you, Whitfield said gently. And she did. She told the whole story: the accusation, the impossible debt, the cellar, the months of darkness and hunger and fear. The room was utterly silent as she spoke. When she finished, Judge Hamilton's face was grave. Mr. Garrison, What is your response to these allegations?" Mr. Garrison stood. When he spoke, his voice was reasonable, almost regretful. "Your Honor, I deeply regret what happened to Miss Lewis. But the truth is, she did steal from me. When I confronted her about it, she became violent and unstable. For her own safety and the safety of my household, I had to temporarily confine her while I determined what to do. I provided her with food and water. 3 times a week, Anna said, her voice suddenly strong. Sometimes once a week, sometimes not at all. And I was planning to contact the proper authorities. Garrison continued as if she hadn't spoken. But before I could do so, Miss Parker and Mr. Brennan broke into my home and essentially kidnapped Miss Lewis. They've twisted a reasonable response to employee theft into something sinister. If that's true, Whitfield said, then you won't mind explaining these other cases. He pulled out a file. James Cooper. According to your records, transferred to Caldwell Mill in 1893. I visited the mill yesterday. They have no record of anyone by that name ever working there. Mr. Garrison's expression didn't change. Perhaps there was a clerical error. Rebecca Mason, transferred to the Patterson farm in 1896. The Pattersons have no record of her. Whitfield pulled out another file. Henry Washington, Mary Green, Samuel Brooks. None of them can be found at the locations listed in your ledger. So where are they, Mr. Garrison? Where did these people go? I can't be held responsible for where people choose to go after they leave my employment. You were paid for them. Whitfield's voice rose. The ledger shows payments received. If you weren't selling them, what were those payments for? The room erupted. People talking, shouting, demanding answers. Judge Hamilton gavelled for order, but it took several minutes to restore quiet. Mr. Garrison, the judge said heavily, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you receive payment for transferring employees to other locations? A long pause. Then, yes, but those were simply fees to cover training costs, and did you have the legal right to transfer human beings for payment? Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Garrison, answer the question. The contracts were legal, Garrison said, but for the first time his voice wavered. They signed agreements stating they would be responsible for any debts incurred. Debts you invented, Whitfield said. Items you planted in their rooms. Infractions you fabricated. You created a system designed to trap vulnerable people and profit from their labor. Judge Hamilton held up his hand. I've heard enough. Mr. Garrison, you will surrender all your employment records to this court for examination. Sheriff Porter, you will search the Garrison Estate thoroughly and document anything relevant to these allegations. And Mr. Garrison, you will remain in custody pending a full investigation. Your Honor, Mr. Reeves began. I said I've heard enough. The judge's voice was sharp. This court is adjourned. We will reconvene in 1 week to review the evidence. 2 deputies moved toward Mr. Garrison. For a moment, he stood frozen, his face blank with shock. He had never believed this would happen. He had never believed anyone would challenge him. He had never believed his carefully constructed system would fall apart. As they led him away, he looked at me. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw something I had never seen before in his pale gaze. Fear. Not the fear he had cultivated in others, the quiet, crushing fear of control, but real fear, the fear of consequences, the fear of justice. Evelyn, Thomas took my hand. It's over. Not yet, I said, but I allowed myself to smile. But soon. Dr. Morrison approached us as the crowd began to disperse. You 3 did something remarkable today. You stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. Will they really investigate? Anna asked. Will they find the others? They'll try, Dr. Morrison said. I'll make sure of it, and I'll make sure you're all protected while they do. What happens now? Thomas asked. Now we wait. We give our testimonies. We help them understand the full scope of what Garrison has done. He looked at me. And we make sure this never happens again. That night, I sat in Rachel's parlor. She had offered us all a place to stay until the investigation was complete, and I finally allowed myself to feel the weight of what we had done. We had exposed a monster. We had freed Anna. We had broken the silence. But the fear was not entirely gone, because I knew there were others like Mr. Garrison, other places where similar systems existed, other people trapped in invisible chains. Still, we had proven something important, that those chains could be broken, that silence could be shattered, that even people with no power could stand up and say, "No more." And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. The investigation lasted 3 months. They found 6 of the missing people listed in Mr. Garrison's ledger. 6 out of 23. The others had vanished completely. Whether they had died, fled, or been sold further down the line, no one could say. But those 6 testified. They told stories similar to Anna's: false accusations, manufactured debts, confinement, and transferred to other locations where they had worked in conditions little better than slavery. Mr. Daniel Garrison was convicted of fraud, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to violate federal anti-peonage laws. He was sentenced to 12 years in the state penitentiary. His father's estate was seized to pay restitution to the victims. The Garrison house stands empty now. No one wants to buy it. They say it's cursed. They say you can still hear sounds from the cellar at night. I don't believe in curses, but I do believe in echoes. The house holds them, all those voices, all those people who passed through its rooms and disappeared into silence. Perhaps that's why it remains empty. Perhaps it needs to remember. Sheriff Porter was not charged with any crime, though he was quietly asked to resign. The town council claimed there was insufficient evidence that he had known the full extent of Mr. Garrison's activities. I think they simply did not want to admit that their own institutions had been complicit. But change came anyway, slowly, like water wearing down stone. The county passed new regulations requiring independent verification of employment contracts. Dr. Morrison established a legal aid society to help colored workers understand their rights, and Mr. Whitfield opened an office in town specializing in labor cases. It was not perfect. It was not enough. But it was something. Thomas and I were married the following spring. We left North Carolina. There were too many memories there, too many ghosts, and moved to Virginia, where my sister helped us establish a small farm. Thomas works with horses. I still sew, but now for my own customers, on my own terms. Anna stayed with Rachel for a time, recovering. Eventually, she moved to the city and found work as a teacher. She writes to me sometimes. Her letters are always hopeful, always looking forward. She says she refuses to let those 8 months in the dark define her life. I admire that. I try to do the same. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about the Garrison Estate, about the photograph that was planted in my room, that family standing proud in front of their humble home. I wonder who they were. I wonder what happened to them. I wonder if they too were caught in Mr. Garrison's web. I think about Rebecca Mason, who carved a warning into the doorframe. I think about all the others whose names I never learned, whose stories were never told. And I think about the moment I found Anna in that cellar, the look in her eyes when she realized someone had finally heard her tapping. Someone had finally come. That is what I hold on to. Not the fear, not the anger, not the injustice, though all of those are real and valid. But the moment when silence broke. The moment when one person reached down and pulled another up. The moment when no became no more. I am writing this account in the year 1902. 5 years have passed since the events I have described. I am 29 years old. Thomas and I have 2 children now, a daughter named Ruth and a son named James. When Ruth is old enough, I will tell her this story. I will tell her about the Garrison Estate, about Mr. Daniel Garrison, about the system he created and the people it consumed. I will tell her about Thomas's courage, about Anna's survival, about Dr. Morrison's integrity. But most importantly, I will tell her that she is never powerless, that even when everything seems stacked against her, even when the rules are designed to break her, even when silence seems safer than speaking, she has a voice, and that voice matters. Because I learned something in that house, in those dark months when fear seemed like the only rational response. Silence protects the powerful and destroys the vulnerable. But sound, even a small sound, even tapping on a ceiling in the dark can bring help, can bring hope, can bring change. This is my testimony. This is my record. And if you are reading this, if this account has somehow survived, then perhaps it serves as proof that even stories meant to be erased can echo forward through time. The Garrison Estate is empty now, but it is not silent. And that, I think, is as it should be. Final archivist's note, dated the 15th of April, 1947. This journal was discovered during demolition of the Garrison Estate, which was finally torn down this month after standing vacant for 49 years. The journal was found sealed in a metal box hidden beneath a floorboard in what was once the sewing room. Research confirms that Evelyn Parker and Thomas Brennan lived in Henrico County, Virginia from 1898 until their deaths. Evelyn in 1951, Thomas in 1949. They were survived by 2 children, 7 grandchildren, and numerous great-grandchildren. Anna Lewis became a prominent educator in Richmond, Virginia, and was instrumental in founding several schools for colored children in the early 1900s. Daniel Garrison served 8 years of his 12-year sentence and died in 1909, shortly after his release, from pneumonia. The county records confirm that 6 victims of Garrison's scheme received restitution, though the amounts were minimal. The remaining 17 individuals listed in his ledger were never located. This journal has been preserved as part of the County Historical Archive. It stands as testimony to a dark chapter in our history and to the courage of those who brought it to light. We remember. We bear witness. We do not forget. Photographer's note found with the journal. Tucked inside the final page was a single photograph. It shows a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children standing in front of a modest farmhouse. The woman is colored, her hand resting on the shoulder of a young girl. On the back, in faded ink, "The Parker family, Virginia, 1902. We made it through." The photograph has been preserved alongside this account. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing and becoming part of our community. These are the stories that time tried to erase the voices that refused to stay silent. Where are you listening from? What time is it where you are right now? Leave a comment below. We want to know how far these forgotten testimonies reach and who is bearing witness to them now. Because remembering is an act of resistance, and every voice that joins in remembering makes the echo